Buzzfeed published a article that was released a couple of days ago by Hamed Aliaziz detailing some really horrific and troubling things that have been taking place to people within the custody of ICE, and this has been happening in at least 6 different states, ranging from Georgia to Washington, and regarding people's medical care or lack thereof. In some cases, people have been given the wrong medication. Somebody was given aspirin even though they had very thin blood, and that was known, and it almost led to this person in ICE custody dying as a result, as well as people experiencing withdrawal from drugs or alcohol, not being given the proper treatment or resources from withdrawal, leading to possible deaths from that. And then ICE has been IHSC, ICE Health Service Corps, has been made aware of a lot of this negligent treatment, or people being given the wrong medications or preventable surgeries, that type of thing, and they have been largely unresponsive or dishonest when confronted about these things. So that's also very troubling. The people in charge of kind of oversight to making sure these things don't happen to migrants when they are detained have been lying or just dishonest when confronted from these facts. And ICE has also been using money that's been earmarked for disaster relief in other areas to support their caging all of these people and children. And there was a case of a man who had some mental health issues going on, and it was left untreated, and as a result he ended up lacerating his penis, which then required surgery and hospitalization after that. So I mean, that's obviously a pretty serious mental health issue. Has to be unresolved for somebody to get to that point of lacerating part of their most sensitive part on their body. And another case of medical neglect or maltreatment was Ronell Romero. Ronell Romero had been living in Missouri for over a decade, working in the restaurant business and different leadership positions. He was then deported back to his home country of Honduras, but the conditions there were so bad that he had to make his way back up to the United States. He was then brought back into ICE custody, and he died in May of 2018 from complications from meningitis, and he died as a result of the negligent medical treatment that he received in while he was incarcerated by ICE. There's also been reports of suicidal people, people with suicidal ideations or behaviors not being given the proper medication or, observation, and then them dying as a result. Efren De La Rosa was a victim of this, and he killed himself in April 2018 while in the custody of ICE. There's also been examples of people being given antidepressants when in fact they needed antipsychotic medications, worsening their psychosis. So obviously, that's a pretty huge glaring mistake, giving somebody who has psychosis and needs antipsychotic medications and then giving them antidepressant medications. They do two totally different things, to my understanding. There's also been evidence that people on multiple occasions have been forcibly medicated. One example of this is when somebody was forcibly medicated with the antidepressant drug Ativan. After this person was forcibly medicated with Ativan, they were observed drinking toilet water and eating styrofoam. So just think about this for a sec. You're a migrant. You go to another country seeking a better life for yourself and maybe your family, and then you are detained by that country's, equivalent of ICE, and then you are forcibly medicated with a drug, and then that later causes you to be drinking out of a toilet and or eating styrofoam, or you are taken into ICE custody and you already have some mental health stuff going on. Obviously, being locked up, you know, in a cage is not going to help that. And then, you develop maybe these suicidal ideations or thoughts while in ICE custody. And then, you're not given the proper oversight or medication. And then as a result, you end up killing yourself, or you end up, like the other person, lacerating your penis, or dying from negligent medical treatment due to complications with meningitis. There was even a case of a 8-year-old boy who had part of his forehead surgically removed in a unnecessary surgery. So just think about that, like how traumatic and horrible of an experience that would be for an 8-year-old boy already, probably disconnected from his parents, his family, and his community. He's not in school. He's locked up in a ICE facility, and then he goes through a surgery, a medically unnecessary surgery, a surgery that shouldn't have happened, and then has part of his forehead removed. I mean, when I was 8-year-old, I was, jumping on a trampoline, playing with my sisters, enjoying a pretty decent childhood. I can only think of like what that would have been like for that 8-year-old child to be locked up in a cage and then have part of his forehead removed unnecessarily. It's sick and disturbing on so many levels that these people, these migrants, these men, women, and children are being treated as less than human. They're not given any type of dignity or respect. They're not being given adequate medical care or nutrition, or time to be outside, and all of these other basic needs are not being met. They're being ripped away from their families and communities, and this is all being done with our tax dollars. So it's even more disturbing because as somebody that lives in the United States, my wages, the taxes from my wages, are going to support locking up these people in cages, and they often are treated in some very horrific and just grotesque ways. And these are just some of the examples I laid out. There's obviously more, and probably even a greater extent to that we haven't even heard about, to be honest. And Buzzfeed only got a hold of this because somebody within ICE, I believe within their medical corps, saw all of this stuff continuing to happen and didn't see any improvement in it, because they saw that the ICE Health Service Corps, the kind of leadership responsible for oversight of the medical care and treatment of people within ICE custody, weren't taking any of these things seriously. So they took it upon themselves to release this information so the public could be made more aware of these horrible things that were being done by our government through the funding of our tax dollars that goes to DS, HS, and ICE. So I mean, again, like AOC and other politicians have called for, ICE needs to be abolished. Our tax dollars should not go to locking up migrants in cages and treating them as less than humans. We need to have a serious conversation about what real immigration reform would look like. And definitely a first step in that would be to, abolish ICE, because it's just ridiculous what our government is doing to some of the most, you know, vulnerable people in our society that, have honestly, by and large part, if they're coming from these different Latin America countries to the United States, they're coming here due to a large part because of the direct policies of the United States, things like NAFTA, as well as our support of these, right wing authoritarian governments in different parts of, Latin America. They're fleeing violence, they're fleeing, poverty, they're seeking, economic opportunity for themselves and their families in the United States, just trying to make, to create a better life for themselves and their families. And then this is how we are treating them. It's just messed up and beyond appalling on so many levels, and we need to abolish ICE like yesterday.